Shalom, 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 shalom. First, I want to give the praises and the glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Bakar Kadash, and double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone. We're leaving this word in truth and spirit and sincerity. And salutations to my fellow Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters that have been edified by the truth of the scriptures of who we are, the true children of Israel, and who the other nations are. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Let's see today's edification. Native American Indians' story of the flood. Native American Indians' story of the flood. So, I want you to listen to a bit of this documentary here. Right? They're going to tell you about, they call it the story of creation. Right? This is the Native American Indians, right? Which we know is the Northern Kingdom. Right? Which also referred to as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And they're going to tell you what their ancestors told them thousands of years ago, right? Over 3,000 years ago, they said they was dating it back to around 2,500 years ago, right? But they said thousands of years ago, the story of creation. Now, some of the timeline that they're going to speak about in this documentary, I'm going to show you clips of it. Some of the timelines that they're talking about in this documentary is wrong. All right, but what I want to show you is how would they know the story? Well, how would they know the story of the flood if they weren't the children of Israel? How would they know that thousands of years ago when they first came to the Americas, as we know how they got there after their captivity under the Assyrian king Shalmaneser V, who took them into captivity. So anyway, listen to, I'm going to quickly play this. And then you tell me.
Our ancestors navigated by the wind and stars, crossing vast oceans and mountain ranges, searching for new lands. Over thousands of years, our ancestors became astronomers and architects, philosophers and scientists, artists and inventors. We created distinct societies and built vast trade systems that covered 2 continents. In 1492, our world was changed forever, but we did not disappear. Today, the languages and teachings of our ancestors remain.
And we know what happened in 1492. I mean, look at them. You tell me these are not Israelites. Just look at how they're dressing. Look at how they've got their head covers, their lamb, their fringes. Can you see the fringes that they've got on their garments? You tell me these are not the children of Israel, that these are not the Israelites. Now, what I liked, what he said at the beginning of this, when he said our ancestors traveled over many oceans to get there. So we know how the Northern Kingdom got there, right? I'm going to go back to it, but we're just going to quickly go to 2 Ezra chapter 13, right? Verse 39, right? 2 Ezra chapter 13, verse 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, all right? That's talking about Yahushai when he's going to come to deliver the elect of Israel, because as we always tell you, they're scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, to the 4 winds of the earth, right? Hence how the 10 lost tribes got to the Americas. Those are the 10 tribes, the Northern Kingdom, right? Referred to as the Kingdom of Israel, which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea the king, which is Hosea the king, right? Hoshea the king, which means Hoshea's name is the same as Joshua's name, which is the same as Yahushai's name, which just means deliverer. Hoshea has the same name, all right, as Yahushai, which Hoshea is Yahushai, whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. which was what they know as Assyria. The waters that it was carried over was the Euphrates River, right? But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen after their captivity and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. All right? This is what they did after their 25 years of captivity under the Syrian king Shalmaneser, also known as Tiglath-Pileser. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. And we're going to show you that in a minute. For the Most High then showed the signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through the country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years. They knew about this journey going back to the times of King Solomon. And the same region is called Azares, which means new land, other land. And I'm going to show you, right? Azares in the Bible, right? We're going to show you in the blue letter called Azares. So let's go back to this a minute. You tell me these are not Israelites. Look at the fringes. The tresses that they're wearing. These are the children of Israel. But listen.
And these are the untold stories of the Americas before Columbus.
Before that devil turned up. Before the devil turned up.
When did the first people arrive in the Americas? Indigenous creation stories tell how our ancestors emerged as humans from the earth, the water, the sky.
And this is what I wanted to focus on. What they refer to as their indigenous creation stories, right? Listen carefully to what they say, what the indigenous creation stories were that was told them to their ancestors thousands of years ago.
And below. Some people believe that we walked into the Americas on foot, across an ancient land bridge that once connected Asia and North America. Others say we paddled here in ocean-going canoes along the Pacific coastline. There's one thing that all of these views of arrival have in common. They all begin.
And they actually came across the Atlantic, not the Pacific, not in canoes, but in ships and boats. It's like what we read here. All right? This is how they came. For through the country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years, and the same region is called Azares. Right? And we're going to show you, we're going to tackle that word in a minute. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. So they had come across on, what we would call ships today. They didn't come across the ocean on boats. It was actual ships. And it wasn't the Pacific, because the Pacific brings you to the west coast of America. They came across the Atlantic. They came down, just to show you, this is the route they came, right? If I say the Arabian Sea, let's see if it shows us, because that's where they would have came through. Just let me show them this map here, just so you can see. So this is, they're coming from here into the Arabian Sea, into the Indian Ocean, and then here's a better map here. So this is the route they would have came. They would have been in captivity here. They would have come down the Euphrates River, into the Persian Gulf, into the Arabian Sea, into the Indian Ocean. This is what the Lord said he held back the floods, around the Horn of Africa, into the Atlantic Ocean, into the Americas. That's the route they took, right? They didn't come this way. They didn't come from the Pacific Ocean way. They came this way. They didn't go that way. All right, let's go.
With a journey. By 1491, tens of millions of indigenous people were living in every part of the Americas, from the high Arctic to the southern tip of South America. There were countless indigenous nations, each with their own distinct language and ways of life. But this didn't happen overnight. It took thousands of years to build this diverse world from a very small founding population. Since 1492, we've shared our traditional territory with people from every part of the world. Today, we continue our search for the origins of our ancestors and the roots of our cultural identity as indigenous people.
For we know, we understand and we know what their roots are, where they go back to. They've lost a lot of their heritage, just like the Lord said, we're going to discontinue you from your heritage, Israel, during the capture of the Americas by these Europeans, by these Edomites. So the minute Columbus stepped foot into the West Indies, because Columbus didn't actually go into the Americas, he only came as far as the West Indies, Cuba, what we know as Cuba and Haiti, Dominican Republic, to the islands in the West Indies. But once these devils got to the Americas, that was it. That was the beginning of them losing their identity. All right? But we know who they are. These are the 10 lost tribes of Israel. This is the northern kingdom.
We have two different kinds of dates. We have the archaeological date that says probably somewhere between 18 to 20,000 years ago, the first non-native born human came into this hemisphere. In terms of indigenous perspectives, we've always been here. Philosophically, we've never been anywhere else.
Well, they've not always been there, and it's not 20,000 years ago. It's roughly 3,000. It's roughly 3,000 years, 2,700 years. All right, they've been in the Americas, right? Because they left. What Ezra's wrote here, this took place when King Shalmaneser entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. This took place, this captivity. Let's go back a verse. Here you go. King Shalmaneser lived around, it's in the Book of Kings, around 725 BC. This took place. They was in captivity for roughly 25 years, and they never went back to the Americas. It was around 725, 724 BC that took place. Now, if we go to Second Kings, this is the king here. Just bring him up here. Second Kings, chapter 18. 18. Let's check the Bible. Yeah, here it is, yeah. Because I'm seeing Hezekiah's name, but Hezekiah was king of Judah. So it says here, and it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, they took it, even in the 6th year of Hezekiah. This is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. Samaria was taken. And the king of Assyria did carry away Israel, which is the northern kingdom, unto Assyria, and put them in Hala and in Harbor by the river of Gozan and the cities of the Medes, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their power, Yahweh, but transgressed his covenant and all that Moses, the servant of Yahweh, commanded, and would not hear them nor do them. So that's when it goes back to this captivity that we're speaking of, right? That Ezra is referring to here. That's king. That's the same king there, Shalmaneser, that took them. So this is the journey that they took to the Americas, but they took this counsel to themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, which was the Assyrians, and go forth into a further country where mankind dwell. So let's just quickly go back here.
Every indigenous nation has its own creation story.
Listen carefully.
These stories have been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years. Creation stories form a powerful part of each nation's identity and our sense of who we are as a people.
So they call it the creation story, all right? But listen to exactly, and you tell me how would they know about these stories of the Bible unless they were the children of Israel, unless they were the Israelites? How would these Native American Indians that were living in this faraway continent in the Americas, right, had no contact with the what we would know today as the East, the rest, the East or parts of the West like Europe, Middle East, and China for nearly 2,000 years before Columbus came down on them. How would they know about these stories? How would their ancestors know about these stories and they call it creation stories, all right? Now listen carefully.
In the beginning, there was a great flood. A few animals and birds survived by clinging to a log. Among them was the tiny muskrat.
Did you hear that? In the beginning, there was a great flood. What does that bring it back to? To go back to the flood, what does that bring us back to? Back to the times of Noah. They're talking about the story of Noah that was told to their ancestors. Right? They're giving it to you in a different way, but they're telling you about the exact same thing. Listen carefully.
Decided they needed to find land, but the world was covered in water. One by one, they took turns diving deep into the water, looking for some dirt to bring back to the surface. But each animal came back empty-handed. Finally, the tiny muskrat dove under the water. When he came back, he had a paw full of earth. He placed it on the back of a turtle's shell. This is how North America became known as Turtle Island. In the beginning, there was only the sea and sky.
This is the Mayans now telling you about their story of creation, right? And they call it the story of creation because when you think about it, everything was made fresh again after the flood. After the flood of Noah's flood, right? When the Most High flooded the whole world and only saved Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives, 8 people. It was, in a sense, it was refreshed. The whole earth was refreshed because now all of the nations were going to come from Noah's 3 sons. Ham, which is the youngest, Japheth is the middle one, and Shem, which is the eldest. Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Every single person on this planet Earth today comes from those 3 sons of Noah. So it would have been a new beginning. So for them to refer to it as the creation story makes sense.
The gods created the earth and populated it with animals and birds. But the animals couldn't.
You hear that? That goes back to the times of Adam and Eve. The Most High created the earth, right? This is the Mayans' story of creation. Before we saw the Anawebi tribe, this is the Mayan tribe, right? The Mayans. Same thing that the Bible tells you. The Most High and the angels created the earth, the animals, the people. Listen to what it says.
So they decided to make humans. The first humans were made from mud, but they fell apart too easily.
What does the Bible say? Now, they may be taking this literally, and the humans were made out of the ground, right? By the angels. Now, what does it say in the Bible? Go back to Genesis 2. This is 2. And it says here, Genesis 2 or Genesis 5, I want. The heavens and the earth were created in a day and filled and grew. Was arranged in the third midst of the water. Yeah, here it is. Genesis 2 and 7. And the Most High Yahweh, the power, right? And the Lord God, Lord is Yahweh, God is power, Yahweh, the power, formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul, right? So the breath of life that he built into him was wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. So this is the only book religious book that I know, with a story where it tells you that man is formed from the dust of the ground. And what did he say? He said, listen carefully.
decided to make humans. The first humans were made from mud, but they fell apart too easily.
Dust of the ground. How would they know about these stories of creation unless these people were Israelites? There's no way that their ancestors are telling their people about how they came about to be unless these were the Israelites, unless these stories were told to their ancestors which they would have known about when they was in captivity under Shalmaneser. They would have known about these stories when they came to the Americas. It's just over time, the story gets watered down less and less. It's been told less and less and less. So we're only hearing bits and pieces of it. But there's no way on Yahweh Bashim Hawashai's earth would these Native Americans Indians be telling you about the story of creation that directly aligns with the Bible story of creation unless these were the Israelites.
The gods made humans from wood, but they had nothing in their minds, so they destroyed them in a flood. Finally,
did you hear that? So he destroyed them in a flood. Now, when he said, oh, he made them out of wood, I always say about that some parts of the story will have got convoluted with other things. When they said, oh, they made men out of wood, because we know men wasn't made out of wood, right? We come out of the dust of the ground, all right? But it's what he said after that. Listen carefully what he says after that, when he says men were made out of wood. What's happened to them?
Finally, the gods made humans out of maize dough. Mud, but they fell apart too easily. Then the gods made humans from wood, but they had nothing in their minds, so they destroyed them in a flood.
You hear that? So they destroyed them in a flood. Goes back to the same story of the flood with Noah, all right? We go to 6. Yeah, Genesis 6, here you go. And the Most High said unto Noah, that the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of the gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without, and pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it. Of the length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. All right? So a window shalt thou make to the ark. In a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do what? Bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under the heavens, and everything that is in the earth shall die. How the hell would they know about the story of the flood unless they wasn't the lost 10 tribes of Israel? How would they know? How would their ancestors have known to be continued? Because as time goes on, you know, the story will get watered down and some bits will be added to it and so forth. But the core thing of the story here, what I wanted to pull out of what's been said here, is their story of creation, of how they came to be, how they ended up in the Americas, goes all the way back to the flood, to the flood, to the flood. And there's only one book where it speaks about the flood. That's the scriptures.
Mud, but they fell apart too easily. Then the gods made humans from wood, but they had nothing in their minds, so they destroyed them in a flood. Finally, the gods
destroyed
made humans
them in a flood. How would they know? All praises to Yahweh Shib Yahushai. Those are the Israelites. We'll just jump up here a minute. Number part here. I mean, you can, by all means, you can watch this in your own time. Like I said, some of it, you know, they're going to go off on some of the stuff that they say in here. But this is what I wanted to come to, the ocean arrival, all right? And how they got to the Americas via the ocean. They didn't walk there by any type of landmass. They got there on ships, the Northern Kingdom. But listen.
When they first started doing their surveys in the what would be the ice-free corridor, the observation they made was that the sites were getting younger as they went north, which is counterintuitive. You'd expect that the oldest sites would be in the north and they'd get progressively younger in the south. So it looked like people were moving north instead of south. So this has always been very paradoxical, and the only way you can explain it is that there were people already living south of the ice sheets, and where did those people come from?
The recent discovery of an ancient village and campsites in the Americas that are more than 14,000 years old supports a new theory that people first arrived by boat along the Pacific coastline of North and South America.
Like I said, they definitely got there by boat, but it wasn't by the Pacific. It was through the Arabian Sea, because the Pacific, they would have gone this way. All right? This is the route that they took. It's the same route that Solomon and his navy that he had at Tarshish took to go to the Americas roughly 250 years, 300 years prior to the Northern Kingdom being taken into captivity and going to the Americas after their time of captivity. They've not gone to the Pacific Ocean way. This is the route they went. Like I said, what I wanted to get from this is that they know that they came there by the ocean. They came there by the ocean on boats, on ships and boats to the Americas, just like how the Bible said, just like how Ezra said. But they took counsel amongst themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, because this is where they was in, need to see, Euphrates. Say images. So that's where they would have come down, the Euphrates River, into the Persian, I believe that's the Persian Gulf. There was another bigger match. Yeah, he goes a better one. Into the Persian Gulf. From the Persian Gulf, they've come into the Arabian Sea, from the Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, to the Atlantic Ocean, to the Americas. That's the route they took. So let's go back when it says here, but they took counsel amongst themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth to a further country which mankind never dwelt. That they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. That's how they came in, to the Euphrates. This is the Assyrian Empire here. It encompasses the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. It's what we know today as parts of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran. This was all part of the Assyrian Empire, all right? Which was, if I say, Assyrian. Images. This is the Assyrian Empire, as you can see. Right, that's the Euphrates, that's the Tigris River. Euphrates, Tigris, Persian Gulf. This is all the Assyrian Empire. They was in captivity during this time, just before this time here. Before 699 BC. That's when they would have come out of captivity, around 700 BC. So, they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow place of the river. For the Most High then showed them signs, and they held still the flood till they were passed over. For through the country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. That was the journey. And the same region is called Assuerus. Let's go back.
In the 70s, researchers proposed an alternative hypothesis to say that the coastal route was also viable. And this sparked a huge debate in archaeology that it had to be one or the other. Which one was it? We're now coming to an understanding that it was likely both happened. However, archaeologists are more leaning towards the coastal route as the earlier alternative.
Any journey along the Pacific coast during the Ice Age would have been treacherous.
Keep in mind that the West Coast at that time would have been choked with icebergs and lots of ice flows. So for people to travel that way, they would certainly require some good ocean-going skills. And that's not out of the question, because we do know from the archaeological record in East Asia that as early as 40,000 years ago, people were able to make open ocean voyages. When people go on journeys like this, their destination is usually unknown to them.
We may never know what compelled indigenous people to embark on this treacherous journey by sea.
What is the history of humanity in North America? We have indications that humans were here, they were producing culture, they were burying their dead, they were becoming a part of the landscape, they were taking ownership of the landscape in their own way.
Once arriving on land, these seafarers would have found themselves in a strange and foreign world, filled with unknown peril and promise.
What did the scriptures say? The Bible says, where is it? That's the flood. Let's go to Deuteronomy 29. And this is what the scripture says, right? Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 28. And the Lord Yahweh rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land. That's what the word Asaretz means. Asaretz. As it is this day, as it is this day, Friday, September the 2nd, 2022, as it is this day. The word another land, just to show you, you've got here, so, try to pronounce this. They pronounce it Achaia, but if it's R, so you can see, all right? Arka, shall I pronounce this? Akar. Akar. Akara. Akara, another. Akara, right? And if we go to, where is it? Another land. And this is probably the best way to show you it here in the word land, where it says, in here they pronounce it Eretz.
Strong's H776. Eretz. Eretz.
Pronounce it properly. Aratazar. Aratazar. So that would be R in the Hebrew. Ra Tazar. Aratazar. Aratazar, which is this word here. They've got it here in the English as Asaretz. Asaretz. So when it says in the same region it's called Asaretz, that's another land. Land is called land, another land, Asaretz. If we go to the Hebrew, once again, they pronounce it Eretz. Eretz. That's how they pronounce
Strong's
it here.
H776. Eretz. Eretz.
And it should be pronounced Ar-Ratazar. 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 Asaretz. Ar-Ratazar, which is Asaretz. That's why the prophecy says Asaretz here is when it says Eretz here, but it should be pronounced Ar-Ratazar, 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 another land. So the prophecy says, let's go back to it. And the Lord rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation and cast them into another land as it is this day. It's all Bible prophecy. Those are the children of Israel. Now there's just one more part I want to show you in this before we shut this down. All right, so it says Middle East between 20,000 and 14,500. Now, we've always said this, that it took the Lord 7,000, 6,000 years to create the universe and the earth. He rested for 1,000 years. 1,000 years to us is one day to the Most High. And the earth is not no more older than between 15,000 and 20,000 years. Maximum would be 20,000 years, maximum. And that's being conservative. All right, it's not no millions and millions and millions and millions of years old, like I like to tell all this bullshit that these scientists and these archaeologists like to tell you about how the universe is billions of years old. It's total bullshit. All right, 1,000 years to the Most High, to us, is one day to the Most High. All right, we know that. If we go to 2 Peter's chapter 3, I believe. Yeah, 3 and 8. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, because they want you to live in ignorance when they keep telling you about billions of years. That one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years down here, and 1,000 years as one day. So the maximum the earth could be would be 20,000 years old. That's the maximum, being conservative. But I want you to listen to this last bit here.
Years. "20,000 years ago, nomadic hunter-gatherers lived in the Kabara cave region in Israel.
You hear that? They lived in the Kabara cave region in Israel, right? Now she's going to talk about the tools and the weapons that they were using to fight and to kill animals with, where they came from. Listen to her carefully.
They developed the Kabaran tool technology using flint to make spear points and arrowheads.
So they developed the Kabara tool technology to make with flint, to make spearheads and arrow points in Israel. In Israel. Listen to her again. Listen to her again.
Region in Israel. They developed the Kabaran tool technology.
Hold on.
20,000 years ago, nomadic hunter-gatherers lived in the Kabara cave region in Israel. They developed the Kabaran tool technology using flint to make spear points and arrowheads. The Solutrean tool industry emerged in Western Europe around 19,000 years ago. The people of this region made tools by napping tiny flakes off the flint core. Hunters also used heat to make the flaking more precise.
North America now, right? Like I said, the timelines, they're saying 13,000 years ago. We know that the Israelites came to America just under 3,000 years ago, not 13,000 years ago, all right? But listen to what she says.
One of the earliest stone tool technologies in North America was the Clovis point, named after the site in New Mexico where the spear points were first discovered.
Exactly the same type of tools that they was making in Israel. You tell me this is not the Israelites. These are the same spearheads using the same flints, the same tools, flints to create the arrowheads and the spearheads for hunting that they was making in Israel. They called it the Kabara tool. But listen to her.
The people who created these tools hunted a wide range of megafauna, including mammoths. Throughout the world, the different styles of tools that people developed determined the type and size of the game they hunted.
As our ancestors settled throughout the two continents, creating hundreds of nations, languages evolved and diversified. And through these languages came stronger social and cultural identities. The Western Hemisphere is the most linguistically diverse region in the world. It's estimated that there were as many as 2,000 distinct languages spoken in the Americas in 1491. Each of these languages are part of a language family, connected through common words, grammar, and diction. Languages are more than a means of communication. For ancient societies, they contain the cultural, historical, and traditional knowledge of a nation. Many of the languages spoken before 1491 are still in use today.
Kay misin tialin ruas kay tukui kausaini.
Chimuruna kan mikanki ancharraxisca
Israelites.
ichaqa suyachayukuyraq chikanta.
Quechua in South America. Mayan in Mesoamerica.
Nabile yamukahku ale icho. Yemen kacha chupal.
Koshalik bitano betikan natsilesh.
Pueblo in North America.